Good morning and welcome to the presentation of the 82nd International Film Festival of La Biennale di Venezia that will take place in Lido from the 27th of August to the 7th of September. We are live from the library of ASAC at the Central Pavilion in Giardini. I am Paolo Lughi, International Press Office for Cinema. I have close to me Alberto Barbera, the artistic director of the film festival, who will shortly present the films in competition in the program. Allow me first to show you an excerpt from the director Franco Maresco. He was shooting this movie dedicated to Goffredo Fofi, who disappeared 10 days ago. Let us see this short video.
Noi vogliamo che i nostri figli imparino a leggere.
I'll always love you. Yes, it's easy to remember, but so hard to forget. So I must dream to have your hand caress me, fingers press me tight. I'd rather dream than have that lonely feeling stealing through the night. Each little moment is clear before me, and though it brings me regret.
Chiedo al Presidente della Biennale di Venezia.
I now invite the President of La Biennale di Venezia, Pietrangelo Buttafuoco, to join us here for a few words of welcome. I want to thank Alberto Barbera and his team and the whole staff of La Biennale. We are ready for this 82nd film festival. And dear Alberto, I just want to mention one name among all of us working in Lido, Roberto Saoner. I want to thank Roberto, and through him, a whole generation of people who stress the importance for La Biennale di Venezia of this film festival, 130 institution, the Ministry for Culture, Julie, the City of Venice, the Veneto region, the Superintendency for Archaeology, Fine Arts and Landscape for Venice and its lagoon. I thank our neighbors, that is the Italian Navy, and all those who contribute to the safe and perfect realization of this film festival. I thank all the sponsors, Campari, Mastercard, Cartier, Armani Beauty and Lexus. I thank Ita, DeLonghi, Intimissimi, Repower, Consorzio Tutela del Vino, Conegliano, Valdobbiadene Prosecco, Telios, Major Events Media, Canon, RTL 102.5. I thank RAI, the official broadcaster of the film festival and media partner of La Biennale di Venezia. And a special thank you to Franco Maresco, a master who knows poetry and freedom. I thank Maresco for allowing La Biennale to show the short video dedicated to Goffredo Fofi, something we tasted for a couple of minutes. And it is the very sense of the work of La Biennale in its sections, even more so for the film festival. The film festival, cinema, has always supported the cinematic quality, looking forward to the future in the very sense of art itself. And I like repeating it. Allow me to say this here among friends and colleagues, that this is it is a mostra, he says, an exhibition rather than a festival. And Mostra del Cinema, through the structure of La Biennale di Venezia, has been fully committed to open up. It is like having white clouds passing through and bringing us to hope, a hope for a sky that is even more blue than possible. And it is getting bluer and bluer. We see it every year in Lido. It is a reference point for young generations. Together with scholars, with experts from all over the world, what we really notice in Lido, and that is extremely satisfactory for us at La Biennale, is that the number of young people attending the festival has grown constantly. Figures confirm this. 2,300 university students who have accredited for this film festival confirms the presence of these numerous people. This new audience that shows its affection and its passion for this historic festival, this young audience perfectly discusses the Italian and international classics. They attend the master classes or the lectio magistralis that we organize, where artists and authors physically present meet this new audience. This is a clear sign of cultural vitality. Does not only concern Biennale Cinema, the film festival, but it touches and impacts the different sections of La Biennale: art, architecture, music, dance, theater as well. But also the archive, the historic archive of La Biennale di Venezia, that every day supports the work of this institution. So, young people, it is really an important. This is why La Biennale is trying to support this new attention to pass to a second stage. Alberto knows this very well, passing from being a spectator, a viewer, to try and express one's own creativity. La Biennale is making an effort in order to reach this objective. Together with the system of La Biennale College for the different disciplines, we have just launched Biennale College Blend. That is a new program involving the different sectors and the artistic directors of the different sectors, focusing on our young people so as to create works that do not belong to a single discipline, but rather cover the different sections. The Ministry had just signed a new a document for the creation of a new pole for contemporary art. And I would like to inform you, and we are really very happy about this, that next year at the Arsenale in Venice, The new headquarters of the Historic Archive of La Biennale di Venezia will be inaugurated, a place for research, experimentation, study, but also production center. It is aimed at all those young people who come to Venice as they come to become apprentices. We believe that these projects make us believe in the growing of these young scholars. We grow trees and forests with faith in their growth, in the future growth. We have to be brave in order to believe in this growth. And as it is for the different sections of La Biennale, also for the film festival with its director, Alberto Barbera, with its talents, with its surprises, with the newly awarded protagonists, we give evidence of the fact that dreams can become truth. Being brave helps you cultivate hopes that bring you to being awarded. In this workshop, because this is the heart of the question, this is what the critical spirit helps us to do, we find an expressive realization for the poetry of a world, the contemporary world, that is impacted by the damage it has created by itself. This brave approach to art can respond to our thirst for culture. It can help build a shelter for those who had their homes destroyed by war. And it can provide the truth to those who have only been lied to. Cinema can bring knowledge to people. We have art that can give back conscience to all of us who are like ostriches hiding our head in the sand of indifference. Working with La Biennale, sitting and watching the other making their best efforts for the realization of this Biennale, I heard some rehearsals. I thought of the verses of a song, Povera Patria, of 1991. And I was surprised by the fact that in 1991, the poet was proposing a clear line, a clear verse in his song. Aren't you troubled by those bodies on earth without any heat? This was written in 1991. He didn't know that in our cell phones, in the information networks, those bodies would become something we are used at, something we have become indifferent to, something we can neglect. I know that in Alberto Barbera's work, we will have a forging of knowledge, a forging of culture, the basis for an active citizenship in our thinking community, with the sky of freedom above us, freedom to allow us keeping our feet, and I'm quoting Raffaele Fior, in order to keep our feet on clouds. Thank you, Alberto. Thank you all.
Allora, grazie Presidente.
Thank you, President. The floor to Alberto Barbera. Good morning. Good morning also from me, and welcome. Welcome back to the annual presentation of the Film Festival program. Every year I promise I will be shorter. I will try this year as well. In order to do so, I will skip the preliminary information. I will spare you the ritual list of numbers on the films that have arrived, the 360-degree selection, the alternation of great masters and emerging talents, and the graphs on gender percentages, which, however, are in the press kit for the fans of these things. So no figures, and let's start immediately with the list of invited films. I would remind you that we have already announced a number of programs, Final Cut in Venice, for example, and the participation of the 3 focus countries in Venice Production Bridge, Morocco, Great Britain, and Chile. We have already announced the project participating in the 9th edition of the Venice Immersive that has become and will continue to be the reference competition in the world for all those who deal with this form of expression, virtual art, and its possibilities to create. From this moment onward, also distribution, because we are starting to put the foundations of a distribution market for immersive Venice. We have already announced the films in the Orizzonti short film section. I take the opportunity to remember the tribute to the film school founded and directed by Jane Campion, A Wave in the Ocean. We will present the 8 short movies produced by the students in this 10-month course. The 8th short film was sent in competition to the Orizzonte Corti. Let us start with the selected movies that have not yet been talked about. Biennale College Cinema. 4 films have been produced this year. In alphabetical order, Agnus Dei by Massimiliano Camaiti, Italy. One Woman, One Bra by Vincent Chogo, a co-production Kenya, Nigeria. Becoming Human, Paul and Lee, Cambodia, USA production. And finally, a film coming from India, Sri Lanka, Secret of a Mountain Serpent. We will see this during the first 4 days of the film festival. Each movie was made by drawing solely on the financial support made available by the grant made available by the Venice Biennale, which consists of 200,000 euros for each movie. Venice Classics, restored films, 19 of them. They have already been announced, but there are also 9 documentaries. The first is Mata Hari, 2 directors, Joe Beshenkowski and James Smith. It is a documentary on the film that David Carradine has been shooting for years and never finished, starring his daughter, Callista. Elvira Notari, Oltre il silenzio, Valerio Ciriaci, a documentary reconstructing the life and career of the first Italian female film director, as well as the most prolific, with a production that counts over 60 feature films and hundreds of short films and documentaries between 1906 and 1930, most of which, unfortunately, were lost. The next documentary is Louis Malle Le Révolté by Claire Douget, a tribute to the director who we remember for winning the Golden Lion in Venice with Atlantic City ex aequo with Gloria by Cassavetes in 1980. Memora de los Olvidados, Javier Espada, a beautiful reflection on the second unforgettable film by the young Buñuel. Megadoc, the backstage shot on the set directed by Mike Figgis, on the set of Megalopolis, the unlucky movie by Francis Ford Coppola. Borman and the Devil, a documentary by David Kittredge dedicated to an unlucky part of the sequel of The Exorcist. Borman spent his time on this project that is one of the biggest commercial failures for Warner Brothers, but it is also a reflection on creative freedom and the value of a visionary filmmaker like Borman, often misunderstood. Holofiction. A few more words to explain this very strange movie realized by Mikhail Kosakowski. It is a 100-minute film essay with music and no dialogue, which reconstructs the history of the Holocaust using only fragments, very short fragments, of over 3,000 films and series released between 1938 and today, which staged the genocide of the Jews. An 8-year work which finally sees the light and questions in a radical way the representability of the Holocaust, which is the great question. Sangre del Toro by Yves Montmayor is a passionate and celebratory portrait of one of the most visionary directors of contemporary cinema, Guillermo del Toro. The Ozu Diaries by Daniel Reim, an exciting reading of passages from Ozu's diaries while the images of his film scroll. Following section, Spotlight, Venice Spotlight, a new title for this section. It is the 5th edition of the competition that awards a prize decreed by the public, supported by Armani Beauty. There are 8 films in the selection. Gira by Shahad Amen from Saudi Arabia, a co-production with Iraq, Egypt, and UK. It is the second film by the director, who won an award at the SIC in Venice in 2019 with Scales. It is a road movie through Saudi Arabia, starring a grandmother and a granddaughter searching the other granddaughter who fled to try and expatriate while they were on the way on pilgrimage to Mecca. Un Cabo Suelto, Daniel Handler, who is a writer and author in Uruguay, well-known, a director, writer, and actor, well-known in South America. The film takes place on the border between Argentina and Uruguay, and the protagonist is an Argentine police officer who is an Uruguayan police officer who is fleeing his country, pursued by law enforcement. It is not a thriller, but a comedy imbued with subtle humor. Made in EU, Stefan Komandarev, the director, well-known in his country, made himself known to us with his previous film, Blaga's Lessons, in Orizzonti in 2023. The new film is set in a mining town where the real emergency is the poverty that reduces the workers of a textile industry of an Italian entrepreneur to accept unfair conditions in order not to lose the only possible job, inspired by real events against the backdrop of the COVID pandemic. Pozzi Ponciroli had made a name for himself for a beautiful Western, Old Harry, out of competition in Venice in 2021. This time, the director sticks to the conventions of gangster movies, but with a radical choice: to tell the story without a single word of dialogue. And he succeeds, let me tell you, in doing this. La hija de la Española, a film co-directed by Mariana Rondon and Marite Ugas, You will remember Mariana Rondon, who presented her first film, Pelo Malo, in 2013 in Toronto, and then won an award at the Turin Film Festival. His third film is the transposition of a novel telling about violence, desperation, and cruelty in Caracas devastated by the regime. Abra le Corps, first movie by a Swiss director, Marie-Else Sguardot. It is the story of a 15-year-old girl, Emma, against the backdrop of the Second World War. She discovered that she is pregnant following a rape and challenges the repressed rural Protestant community to emancipate herself with determination from the moral hypocrisy of the village. Calle Malaga, Marianne Touzani, one of the best directors in Morocco. She was in Cannes with the previous The Blue Kaftan that was also distributed and successful in Italy. It is a comedy that rests entirely on the shoulders of the great actress Carmen Maura. After 40 years spent in the Spanish Quarter, in the Spanish neighborhood of Tanger, the protagonist is evicted by her daughter, who needs to sell the house to support her children in Madrid. Determined to take back what is hers, the protagonist goes on the counterattack. Last movie in the section Spotlight is an Italian movie, Daniele Vicari, Ammazzare Stanca. Vicari. I never get his name correctly. I apologize with Daniele, whom I have been knowing for many years. An excellent cast, Montesi, Marchioni, Thomas Tabacchi, Rocco Papaleo, among others. It is the true story of Antonio Zagari, the son of a powerful boss of the 'Ndrangheta, who moved to the Varese area, who in the 70s decided to rebel against the criminal destiny traced by his father, refusing to follow his footsteps. And here we are at Orizzonti. Feature films in this section, 19 of them. The competition will be opened by the movie on the opening of the festival, together with the main competition, by this movie, Mother, by Teona Strugar-Mitevska, a co-production between Belgium, North Macedonia, Sweden, and Denmark, an international co-production for a well-known director. She was in Venice with the Prisio movie, the unconventional portrait of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, played by Numi Rapace, the result of a 15-year research to restore the truth of a controversial, ambiguous, and not without contradictions character. Divine Comedy. I will not pronounce the title in Farsi, by Ali Asghari, the Iranian director Ali Asghari, who studied in Bologna after his degree in Tehran. He comes back to Venice, where he had already been twice, in 2014 with a short film and in 2017 with a feature film in competition at Orizzonti. Not unlike the previous ones, this film also reflects on what it means to be filmmakers, artists today in Iran, between censorship, bans, bureaucracy, tailings, and police raids. It does so in the form of a comedy, a very enjoyable comedy, by the way. Hiedra, the first film from Ecuador in competition in Venice. The third feature film by the director, who is well known abroad, the dramatic story of a mother looking for the son she abandoned after birth. An Italian movie in Orizzonti, coming back, Carolina Cavalle. She was in Venice with Amanda a few years ago, a unique case of a debut that has obtained wide international distribution. This is a second movie with Benedetta Porcaroli as the protagonist, and there is a lot of expectation for her new movie. Strange River, a debut movie by Jaume Calaret Muxart. I hope I said his name correctly. It is an ambitious first film, a coming of age that tells of a teenager on vacation with a family along the German banks of the Danube, a journey that inevitably coincides with the discovery of himself by virtue of the encounter with the mysterious boy who appears and disappears during the movie. Lost Land, a movie by a Japanese director, the third movie, who has always been interested in cases of people who have emigrated to other countries that are not always friendly with immigrants. In this case, the movie follows the vicissitudes of two children, brother and sister, belonging to the Rohingya minority, who are prosecuted in Myanmar, forced to flee to escape prosecution from Myanmar, trying to reach Malaysia through Bangladesh and Thailand. The film begins as a documentary, but from the moment it takes on the point of view of the children who remain alone at a certain point, it also takes on almost a fairy tale dimension. Grand Ciel, a debut film of the Japanese director who studied in Paris, Akihiro Ata. He graduated from Venice in France, in Paris. This is his first film, and it is a strange combination of elements of social denunciation and references to science fiction cinema. Rose of Nevada is a movie by a British author, a science fiction film, although set in the realistic context of a small fishing village in Cornwall with a stellar cast that includes George Mackay and Callum Turner, the most famous, internationally renowned actors, British actors. Late fame, Kent Jones is the second feature film by Kent Jones, former film critic and collaborator of Martin Scorsese. He relies on a consummate producer like Christine Vachon and an exceptional performer like Willem Dafoe to tell the story of a former poet whose work is rediscovered by a group of young New York artists. Milk Teeth is the second movie of a director who made a name for himself in the Orizzonti section a few years ago, in 2022, with his movie To the North. This new film, much more complex and mature, is set in the late 80s, just before the fall of Ceausescu, and take its cue from the disappearance of a little girl to reconstruct the climate of oppression and hypocrisy of the regime. Pin de Farti, with the switch with the initials reversal, is a movie by Alejo Mogillansky. The director is part of the group of independent Argentine artists known as El Pampero Cinema. 3 years ago, we made the acquaintance of the beautiful movie by Laura Citarella, Trinkelauken. You certainly remember it. She's coming back as an actress here, and the title, with the initial reversed, refers to the theatrical test by Samuel Beckett, Fin de Partie, a starting point for a triple original interpretation. Father is the third movie by Teresa Notova, who won an award for the best film at Locarno in 2022 and won an award for best work in progress at the MIA in Rome last year. I do not want to spoil anything because you have to be surprised by the unexpected narrative of this story. En el Camino by Davide David Pablos, a Mexican director who was in competition at Horizonte with his first movie, La Vida Después, in 2013. He returns with his fourth film, an original love story set in the most violent part of Mexico between truck drivers and drug traffickers near Ciudad Juarez. Song of Forgotten Trees is a debut movie by a young Indian director, Anuparna Roy, who tells with great delicacy and sensitivity the story of two modern female roommates in Mumbai, forced to measure themselves daily with the irreducible machismo of a society prisoner of behaviors and habits that are difficult to eradicate. The second Italian movie by Laura Samani, Un anno di scuola, based on the novel by Stuparic. While the novel was set in Trieste in 1919, Laura Samani sets it in Trieste in 2007. It is the second movie by Laura Samani after the promising debut of Piccolo Corpo, which was at SIC in Cannes in 2021. Gaston Solniki comes back to Orizzonti for the third time between fiction and the documentary, a Viennese trilogy. Willem Dafoe is the manager of a historic hotel that fights to avoid the closure decided by the new owners of the hotel. Barrio Triste is the first feature film by Stills, a photographer and director of Colombian origin, well known for his music videos, many of which are extremely innovative, many of which were made with Bad Bunny, who also appears in the film. The film is partly related to the late Harmony Korine. From Thailand, Human Resource, the debut film of this Thai director. I will not dare to pronounce his name, Nawapul Tarom Grattanarit. His first movie had been financed by Biennale College Cinema in the first edition of Biennale College. After a few commercial works, Nawapul has come back with a film of great stylistic and formal rigor, which reflects on the problem of the world of work in an advanced capitalist society. The last movie in the Orizzonti section is Funeral Casino Blues, a bizarre movie by Roderick Varich. He's the co-writer of a movie that was in competition in Venice in 2023, The Theory of Everything. This movie, as a first film as a director, is entirely set in Bangkok, a sentimental melodrama, a film of social denunciation, besides and above all, a film of doubles and ghosts in the tradition of the cinema of those countries. This was for the Orizzonti competition, and then we have out of competition, starting with the three short films we are presenting out of competition. One has already been announced. It is the short by Jan Artus Bertrand that will be screened at the pre-opening of the Venice Film Festival, together with the restoration of Queen Kelly. It is an act of love for Venice and a strong reminder to reflect on the delicacy of its ecosystem that risks disappearing. The second short is by Rachid Bouchareb, co-produced by France. While waiting for a next feature film on the same theme, Bouchareb has made this short, 21 minutes, with archive pieces on the nuclear tests carried out in the Sahara Desert by France during the occupation of Algeria, with damage to health and the environment that still remain, and for which France has never acknowledged its responsibility. The last short, Out of Competition, is the latest work by Charlie Kaufman, a peculiar director, a co-production between US and Greece, shot in Athens, How to Shoot a Ghost, a visual and sound poem following the ghost of two young people who had disappeared, a queer Lebanese translator and a half-Irish photographer. In the words of the director, they wander the city together, finding consolation in the difficult beauty of life and its consequences. Series. Out of Competition, 4 series this year. One will only have 2 episodes, Portobello by Piergiorgio Bellocchio. Piergiorgio is trying to complete it with Fabrizio Gifuni as a protagonist. The other series instead are presented in full. Un Prophète by Enrico Artal, an 8-chapter series inspired by Jacques Audiard's masterpiece, which won the Grand Jury Prize in Cannes in 2009, and is written by the same screenwriters of that film. Enrico Artal collaborated to the writing of the film, a French production that has been entrusted to an Italian director. He became known in Venice with his first film in 2013, Il Terzo Tempo, and then returned to competition in Orizzonti in 2023 with Il Paraiso, which deserved 2 awards, Best Actress and Best Screenplay. A new series by Hagai Levi. He was in Venice with his previous series in 2021, based on Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage. This new 6-episode miniseries is based on the writing of Etty Hillesum, the young Dutch writer whose diaries, written in Amsterdam in 1941-1942 under Nazi occupation before being deported to Auschwitz, and are among the brightest and most courageous testimonies of the 20th century. Her books sold a lot in Italy. I repeat, the brightest and most courageous testimonies of the 20th century. The latest miniseries produced by Stefano Sollima, Il Mostro, The Monster, 4 episodes, a reconstruction based on the original documents and the investigation in the so-called Monster of Florence case, a cold case, as they say, a detailed reconstruction of involving the first suspects who were condemned and then turned out not to be guilty. Maybe Sollima will tell us something about the follow-up, because it stops at the eve of the coming on the scene of Pacciani. The Italians will certainly remember about him. Another section, a small section, music documentary. Every year, the festival presents at least one documentary about a singer, songwriter, or a band. This year we have 4 of them, so we have decided to dedicate an entire day to the relationship between cinema and music. The first is Nino, 18 giorni. The first is the unconventional portrait of one of the Napolitan singer-songwriters most loved by the public, not only in Italy, Nino D'Angelo. And the documentary was made by his son, Tony D'Angelo. Piero Pelù, Rumore Dentro. Piero Pelù was the frontman of the Liftiba, who had to withdraw after an accident that made him a victim of acufenes. He's subjected to tinnitus and he had to retire from the scene. Newport and the Grateful Cream is an editing of unpublished archive footage that reconstructs the history of the legendary Newport Folk Music Festival between 1963 and 1966 that came back to success after the movie by James Mangold in his biopic on Bob Dylan. You can see the legendary performance of Dylan himself, legendary performances by Dylan, John Baez, Pete Seeger, John Cash, Peter Paul and Marys, and many other singers more or less famous who made the history of American folk music. This archive footage was saved by a collector, Joey Lauro, but the movie is edited and directed by Robert Gordon. And the last of these 4 documentaries on cinema and music is Nevergreen Francesco De Gregori. He made a series of concerts in a small theater in Milan, 250 seats. The title is Nevergreen because he decided to replay a series of songs from his past that had never been particularly successful and therefore had become Nevergreens. And contrary to what he usually does, De Gregori introduces the songs in public and creates duets with other singers, Malika Yan, Elisa, Giovanotti, Ligabue, Zucchero, and Amedeo Bianchi. Out of competition, non-fiction, many documentaries, 15, more than usual, a sign that this segment of audiovisual production is growing, both in terms of quality and attention from the public. And we can only be happy about this because documentaries are really excellent in this section. We start with an Afghan director who lives in the Netherlands today, Abuzar Amini, Kabul Between Prayers, an observation of the daily life of a young Taliban who leaves the countryside to serve at an armed checkpoint in the capital controlled by the Taliban. We discover that his only desire is to be able to become a martyr one day. And his younger brother is educated in the same cause. Ferdinando Scianna, you need no presentation. Ferdinando Scianna is one of the best-known Italian photographers. He was the first to be admitted in the Magnum agency in Paris. The documentary is by Roberto Andò, as Scianna was a source of inspiration for him, as Andò himself was for Tornatore. Mark by Sofia is the portrait of the designer Marc Jacobs. Sofia Coppola has been a friend of his for a long time. She reconstructs his career and the years when both were young, the New York Nights and the street show organized with Spike Jones by Sofia Coppola herself, a very lively documentary. I Diari di Angela, capitolo terzo, the third chapter of the reconstruction by Yervan Chanikian with his wife Angela Riccilucchi. She disappeared a few years ago. They portrait and collaborate with the writer Lucrezia Lerro, who gives voice to the intimate writing of Angela Riccilucchi, telling about the artist's poetics and her illness. Janikian points out that it is a political movie. What is personal is political, they used to say in the past. And so it is easy to understand why we can say this about this movie. Ghost Elephants, we decided to tribute the Golden Lion for a lifetime achievement to this director who continues to work. We will have the world premiere of his latest documentary, Ghost Elephants, in pursuit of the tracks of a mysterious herd of ghost elephants in the jungles of Angola. As exciting as a thriller, as is often the case for Herzog's documentaries. They seem to be fiction, sci-fi movies. Jiang Kei, My Father and Gaddafi, a documentary co-produced. She's the daughter of the greatest political opponent of Gaddafi, a human rights activist. She reconstructs his life and his disappearance at the hands of the Libyan dictator with the use of rare and precious archival film documents showing the responsibilities of Italian colonialism in Libya and the atrocities committed against the local population. The Tale of Cillian, the new documentary by Tamara Kotevska. She had earned a double Oscar nomination with the previous film, Honeyland. This new work stages the story of a farmer and his unlikely but real friendship with the stork in the country where there is the highest number of storks in the world, against the backdrop of the economic crisis of agriculture in North Macedonia, which has forced many farmers to emigrate in search of work. Nuestra Tierra, the long-expected new movie by Lucrezia Martel, a documentary that is co-produced by Argentina, US, Mexico, France, Netherlands, and Denmark. It took many years of work, both to complete the necessary research and to find a complete form to reconstruct the case that revolves around the murder of Javier Chocobar, an indigenous man killed in 2009 in the province of Tucumán by white men trying to expel the indigenous community from their land for a mining project, a case that became famous in Argentina for a trial that is reconstructed in the movie. And Lucrezia Martel contributed to shed light on this dramatic episode in the history of the country. A remake by Ross McIlwee is the latest documentary of a director who was in Venice years ago with two documentaries, both starring his son Adrian. The new film is a complex and painful reflection on the dramatic events that led to the death of his beloved son, and at the same time on the value of images, his position as a director, and the incredible story linked to the proposal of a remake for one of his most famous films, Sherman's March, that Howard Weinstein made to him many years ago. Kim Novak's Vertigo by Alexander Philippe, realized on and with Kim Novak. It is thanks to Alexander that we got in touch with Kim Novak, who was tributed the second Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement. Alexander Philippe last year won the award for the best film on the film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre by Toby Hopper. This is a portrait of this extraordinary interpreter. Cover Up by Laura Poitras. She doesn't need any presentation. She won the Golden Lion in Venice in 2022. It is a portrait with Mark Obenhaus, a portrait of one of the most famous American investigative journalists, Seymour Hersh. Not many know about him. He's shy and obsessive. It took many years to convince him to stand in front of a camera. Seymour Hersh is the author of the most important reports in the 1950s in the U.S., starting from his research on chemical weapons trials in the 1950s, banned by Nixon in the following years, but also the famous the famous story of My Lai, the massacre of My Lai with Abu Ghraib, or the numerous misdeeds in South America by CIA, and many others. Retracing his career between ups and downs, we always have downs as well, it is a way to reread the American history of the second half of the 20th century, realizing how many are the dark and deviant sides of the politics of a country that grew up sheltered by the myth of the cradle of democracy. Broken English is a documentary dedicated to Marianne Faithfull. In the months preceding her death, the two English artists, who are also a couple, organized a series of interview sessions with the former singer, set in a very original context of fiction films, entrusted to the conduction of two great actors such as Tilda Swinton and George McKay, with great use of archival footage and photographs of great interest. Notes of a True Criminal is a documentary by Alexander Rodnyansky and Andrei Alferov. We know Rodnyansky, a great international producer of some of the most important movies awarded in the most important European festival. He was sentenced in absentia to 8.5 years for his statements against the invasion of Ukraine. Rodnyansky was born in Kiev, but he lived in Moscow for many years. He had his company there. He was forced to run away from Russia, not to be jailed. With this documentary, he tells the stories through archive footings of the Second World War, documentaries, his own documentaries and images from scientific films directed by his teacher and mentor, Felix Sobolev. The film is very personal and becomes a Soviet counter-story, which begins with the tragedy of Babin Yar, passes through Chernobyl, and reaches the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Alexander Sokurov is back in Venice after many years with a monster movie, a 5-year-long documentary, Director's Diary. Sokurov, between 1961 and 1995, kept a daily diary noting large and small events, not only for the Soviet Union, or small daily events. He decided to transfer these notes into a 5-hour film that year after year shows excerpts from popular films of the time and but also Soviet propaganda footage. It is not easy to follow. You have to maintain 3 different levels of reading for this movie, but it is extremely interesting. It talks about our history in the second half of the 20th century. And the last movie in this section for non-fiction, out of competition, is by Tsai Ming-liang, an on-the-road movie in a foreign country in the manner of Tsai Ming-liang. Not a single line of dialogue, only fixed shots with which the director observes a space unknown to him, the buildings that dot the landscape and the houses of those who live there. They are the key and in some ways the protagonists of this exploration of cinema's ability to become representation and evocation, even without the need for words. Out of competition, fiction, 11 films. Let's start from the end. That is from the closing film of the festival that we had not yet announced, a French movie, Chien 51, Dog 51, by Cédric Jiménez, an action movie director. He directed the French remake of French Connection, Bac Nord as well. He shoot a movie on the 5 days following the Bataclan tragedy. This is an adrenaline-pumping sci-fi thriller set in Paris in a dystopian near future, with a really stellar cast that includes Gilles Lelouch, Adèle Exarchopoulos, Louis Garrel, Romani Dury, and Valeria Bruni Tedeschi. A high-tension festival finale, highly spectacular. Then, in the usual alphabetical order, for the directors, Sermon to the Void by Hilal Baydarov. Maybe you remember him. He was in competition years ago. He comes from Azerbaijan. He was in Venice in 2019 with the movie Mother and Son. In the meantime, he has found a mentor who believes in him a lot, Carlos Reigadas. No need to present him. And he returns to Venice with a fascinating and hypnotic visual poem entirely shot in the desert, searching from the meaning of life, a film that does not contain a single realistic image because they are all electronically processed and colored. There are no realistic images. They're all processed and treated electronically, accompanied by a reiterated reflection in the form of a narration on the vanity of the world and on the need to abandon our daily obsessions to find a meaning for our existence. a tribute to one of the masters of Italian cinema by Antonio Capuano, one of the masters of Sorrentino, 85 years old. He continues to make films consistent in his search for a nonconformist cinema, contrary to the conventions of beautiful writing, in search of a truth that manifests itself in the artifices of the mise-en-scène. The theme is the underdeclared war of men on women under the pretext of contending for a child after separation in the face of an inadequate judicial system. The two protagonists are Teresa Saponangelo and Vinicio Marchioni. Another Italian movie out of competition, the new movie by Andrea Di Stefano, Il Maestro. Di Stefano abandons the convention of the action movie in which he has distinguished himself so far to try to renew the conventions of the Italian comedy with the story of the relationship between an incapable tennis teacher and a talentless teenager. Pierfrancesco Favino is perfectly at ease in the figure of a loser defeated by life, but the real revelation is the boy, surprising Tiziano Menichelli. We will certainly see again in other films because he is really extremely good. Although he is, this is the beauty film. After the Hunt, because of a decision by Luca Guadagnino and Amazon production out of competition, another all-American film for Luca Guadagnino, although the film was entirely shot in London. It is set in a prestigious American university. A young American actress, Nora Garrett. It is the story of a complaint of sexual violence in the context of this prestigious American university. A stellar cast: Andrew Garfield, Julia Roberts, Chloe Sevigny, Ayo Edibiri. Allow me to tell that this first time that Julia Roberts will step on the red carpet of the Venice Film Festival, so we are very happy to have her in Venice. Mamoru Osoda, I am not passionate of Japanese action movies. He is one of the greatest animation movie producer. After his movie is entitled Scarlet, it has been bought by Sony for the worldwide distribution. It is the story of a princess determined to avenge the death of her father, a murdered king. There are many references to Western tragedies, Shakespeare in particular, and it takes place largely in a dimension that is defined the land of the dead, where those who do not carry out their revenge risk vanishing into the air. I let you discover this masterpiece by a master of animation. The Last Viking. Anders Thomas Jensen is a prolific Danish screenwriter. He won an Oscar for one of his first short films. This is a dark comedy, a surreal journey that mixes dramatic, comic, and grotesque tones in search of a hidden treasure after a robbery, which ends in the most extravagant of ways. Among the protagonists of a prestigious cast, Danish actors, Matt Mikkelsen stands out, the most celebrated actor in that country, and he was very famous internationally. He comes back to Venice. He was here last year with an out-of-competition movie. In the Hand of Dante, a movie that is being talked about, that has been talked about for 2 years, the latest movie by Julian Schnabel. long blocked for a dispute we are not going to talk about. It was blocked by this dispute between the author and his financiers. The film arrives in Venice without the cuts that had long been threatened. 2 hours and a half. Most of the movies this year, with just one exception, last from 2 hours 15 minutes up to 2 hours 30 minutes. This is the new international standard, which is quite concerning, I must say, also for those who have to program the movies, because packing all of them in our agenda is quite a problem. But we will manage also this year. This movie is based on a cult novel published in 2002. Was shot largely in Italy with an extraordinary cast: Oscar Isaac, Gerald Butler, Martin Scorsese, Jason Momoa, Al Pacino, John Malkovich, Franco Nero, and Gal Gadot. It is at the same time a journey in search of the original manuscript of the Divine Comedy with unexpected crime story implications, but it is also a journey through time to find Dante and his search for the literary and sentimental absolute. Another Italian movie out of competition by a young director, one of the most promising young Italian talents, Paolo Stripoli. He made his debut with a genre movie, a horror movie, last year. He is shooting now a movie with a prestigious cast. I will not spoil the plot. You will discover it yourself. Suffice it to say that we are in a quiet mountain village that hides a terrible secret. In Venice, it will be one of the 2 Italian films, Mezzanotte, at midnight. Gus Van Sant, it is the happy return of one of the protagonists of independent American movie. He had been absent since 2018 because he made television in the meantime. It refers to something that happened in reality. A broker who was a guy kidnapped the director of a loan agency, denouncing that he had been scammed and demanding compensation and apologies. The protagonist is Bill Skarsgård, but there is also an important interpretation by Al Pacino. We are happy to have Gus Van Sant back to cinema with a beautiful movie. The last movie in this section out of competition, it is the last Italian movie out of competition, Orfeo, a debut movie by Virgilio Villoresi. Virgilio Villoresi, Tuscan by birth but Milanese by adoption, is an appreciated director of experimental films, music videos, and commercials for major fashion houses. He is well known abroad. He makes his movies with artisanal animation techniques inspired by the cinema of Jan Swartzmeyer, Zeman, and McLaren. Even this last film, based on the unfortunate, at least for the time, comic poem by Dino Buzzati. It is an entirely self-produced and self-financed movie, a bit in the manner of Coppola, if you pardon the comparison. It is made by contaminating live footage and graphic animation that aims at visual effects of great suggestion and originality. It is the second Italian film at midnight, Mezzanotte. Last section, 21 films in competition this year, one less than last year. I always hope I can manage to go down to 18 movies, but every year I have to exceed that number. We begin, and you already know, with La Grazia by Paolo Sorrentino, the opening film on the evening of the 27th of August. I am not anticipating anything so as not to spoil the surprise of a movie that really bets on its originality. In alphabetical order, another expected movie, The Wizard of the Kremlin, by the homonymous novel by Giuliano da Empoli, with a screenplay written by Assayas himself and Manuel Carrero, who also appears in the film in a quick cameo. As I imagine you all know, the film tells the irresistible rise to power of Putin through a fictional character of his spin doctor, played by an extraordinary Paul Dano, while Putin is an equally impressive Jude Law. Also, this movie is 2 hours and a half. J. Calais, the new film by Noah Baumbach, the third movie in competition in Venice by Baumbach, a comedy written in collaboration with his wife, Greta Gerwig, and shot largely in Italy. At the center, a successful actor in an identity crisis played by George Clooney in a great shape, and at his side, many actors, Adam Sandler, Bill Kudrup, Laura Dern, and many others. Kauter Ben Anya had emerged in Orizzonti with the first movie. She was in competition 2 years ago in Cannes. She's back to Venice with this movie, The Voice of Hind Rajab, one of the movies that will most impress the audience and the critics. And I hope there will be no polemics. A sad event you will probably remember, referred to by many media. On the 29th of January 2024, the Red Crescent volunteers receive an emergency call. A 6-year-old girl is trapped in a car in Gaza with her uncles and cousins under fire from Israeli soldiers. She begs to be rescued. She's the only survived in the car. I am moved if I think of the movie. While trying to keep her on the line, the volunteers of the Red Crescent try to do everything they can to get an ambulance to her, using the authentic existing audio recordings of the telephone calls between the girl, the volunteers of the Red Crescent, the uncle who lives in Germany, and the mother who lives close to the place where the event took place. Kauter Benania reconstructs the tragic episode. The telephone calls are authentic, I must remember this. House of Dynamite, different dimension, the expected comeback of Catherine Bigelow. Her latest movie was in 2017, and it is therefore a great pleasure to greet her back in competition. Revealing something of the plot would be doing a disservice to the film, which works on the fears that are as contemporary as possible, those related to the senseless use of atomic weapons. The evocation of the possibility of a nuclear catastrophe, however, is not produced through exhibited carnage, but in the daily details of lives being broken. More is better not to say. You will discover it yourself. The Sun Rises on Us All, a Chinese movie, the coming back of a director we know, Chai San-jung. In 2011, he was in competition in Venice, and he won the Silver Lion for Best Director with his film People Mountain, People Sea. It returns today with a social melodrama set in present day, which questions the ethical and moral values with two stars of the Chinese cinema, well known not only in cinema, Chin Chilei, who was, among other things, the protagonist of the first and only TV series by Wong Kar-wai, Blossom Shanghai, that was extremely successful in the Southeast Asia. Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro, one of the most discussed movies. We know that for 10 years, Del Toro had been trying to make the movie from Mary Shelley's novel, which has always been a source of inspiration for him. A stellar cast again: Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, Christoph Waltz, Mia Goth, and Charles Dance, among many others. Expect something very spectacular, since Netflix has not skimped on the means made available to Guillermo's creative imagination. Elisa by Leonardo di Costanzo is the second Italian movie in competition in Venice. For his fiction feature film, Leonardo di Costanzo worked on a book by one of Italy's leading criminologists, Adolfo Ceretti, Gingio, for his friends, in collaboration with Lorenzo Natali, another criminologist. The book is entitled I Wanted to Kill Her, Io volevo ucciderla, and a very successful novel, and is a true story of a murderer who killed her sister and tried to do the same with her mother, perhaps also with her father. And the true criminologist met her in jail and convinced her to admit her responsibility. She had refused to recognize us until that moment. The two criminologists support the so-called restorative justice, an extremely topical theme. A pied d'oeuvre, the seventh movie by Valérie Donzelli, the first time in competition in Venice. There is a novel at the basis of this movie, a successful novel in France, not translated in Italian, the story of a successful photographer who abandons everything to devote himself to writing. He discovers that he has suddenly become poor and has to invent a way to survive in order to achieve his goal. He lives in a basement, a case of resilience to try and materialize one's own dream. Bastien Bouillon is very good at interpreting with delicacy and irony the role of an individual willing to do any job, even the most humiliating, in order to safeguard his freedom. Silent Friend is the new movie, the sixth or seventh movie by Ildiko Enyedi, one of the most important Hungarian directors. It is shot in different eras, 3 episodes, the first in 1908, the second in 1972, and the third in 2020. It is shot with different supports, the first in 35 millimeters, the second 16 millimeters, and the third in digital. They all revolve around the idea that plants and the vegetal world have a decisive influence on humans and can help determine the existence. In addition to many German actors, the film was shot entirely in Germany, in the Botanical Garden in Marburg and in Cologne. In the first episode, we find Tony Leung as a protagonist, the actor we awarded with the Golden Lion for a Lifetime Achievement a couple of years ago. And then we have Lea Seydoux in a small role, but above all, a gigantic, centuries-old ginkgo biloba tree, which is perhaps the authentic protagonist of the film. The Testament of Anne Lee, the new movie by Mona Fastvold, the third movie, written with her husband, Brady Corbett, and also shot in 70 millimeters, but like The Brutalist, but slightly shorter, 2 hours and a half as well. A sort of musical that reconstructs the existence of the founder of a religious sect of the 18th century. Their name was the Shakers, which is why it is a musical, who, starting from Europe, put their roots in the United States, where some followers still survive today. There are not many followers of this community that had very rigid rules, some of them acceptable, some others quite questionable, like absolute castity. You will discover it. Father, mother, sister, and brother. The first time, Jim Jarmusch, he was never in Venice before. It seems incredible. I tried to bring him to Venice in the past years, but Cannes had always prevailed. We managed to have him this year. We are particularly happy because it is a 3 episodes movie with an incredible cast, with Kate Blanchett, Adam Driver, Charlotte Rampling, Tom Waits, Vicky Krieps, India Moore, and Lika Sabat, and many others. Useless to tell you the story in the movie. It deals with the family relationship, parents and children, with irony but also tenderness, as is typical of Jarmusch. Bugonia, a much expected movie announced on the media. Yorgos Lanthimos was in competition in Venice 3 times, winning a Coppa Volpi for Best Actress, Olivia Colman for The Favorite, and the Golden Lion for Poor Things. This is the remake of a Korean movie of 2003, not too well known, which is why I will not spoil the story of the movie. It is a sci-fi story with lots of surprises. The protagonist is Emma Stone, her 3rd collaboration with Lanthimos. Not the last, I think, as well. And the other Italian movie in competition is Duse by Pietro Marcello, who returns to Venice after Martin Eden, with which Luca Marinelli won the Coppa Volpi for his best performer. He returns with a film about the last years of Eleonora Duse, played by a magnificent Varelia Bruni Tedeschi, with his most ambitious film for Marcello, the cynic reinvention of the past and its protagonists, Leonora Duse, Mussolini, D'Annunzio, is reflected in the use of authentic archive footage, which is usual in Marcello's movies, but this time they are used in a truly extraordinary way, with the long journey of the body of the unknown soldier that crosses Italy from the Alps to the Vittoriale in Rome, where it was buried, and it follows the evolution of the events and the attempt of Duse to go back to theater. Un film fatto per bene, the fourth Italian movie in competition this year. Franco Maresco is also back. He was in 2019 with La Mafia non è più quella di una volta, that earned him the special jury prize. The pretext of the film is the film never made about Carmelo Bene, although it is a movie about Carmelo Bene, and you will see. The text is a long, self-ironic and bitter reflection on his personal obsessions, the inability to finish the films. He has started the contempt for what Italian cinema has become, the desire to escape and isolate himself from a world in which he does not recognize himself. Speaking of unfinished films, you have seen at the beginning the images dedicated to Goffredo Fofi. You will see other images at the end of this press conference. And then you will see a third excerpt during the film festival, parts of an unfinished movie. Maresco started a few years ago on and with the Goffredo Fofi that was interrupted and not yet edited. We hope the movie will be finally produced. If you want to stay here at the end of the press conference, you see another 5-6 minutes dedicated to Goffredo Fofi. Goffredo bellissimo. Orphan by Laszlo Nemes. He started with a film in competition at Cannes, Soul's Son. Another film in 2018 in Venice, Tramonto. Orphan is perhaps his most personal film to date because it is based on his father's memories. And perhaps for this reason, Nemes renounces some of the characteristics of his cinema, the long and enveloping sequence shots that he had seduced us with for his first two films, to choose a straight and hard path of a story set in the days immediately following the Hungarian revolt against the communist regime. But it is a movie about the story of this boy who still waits for his father, who had disappeared during the Second World War. He has to come to terms with another possible father. The second French movie, the third French movie in competition is L'Étranger by François Ozon. We must recognize the courage of Ozon for having decided to attempt a new film adaptation of Camus' novel after that of Visconti in 1967 with Marcello Mastroianni in the role of the impassive protagonist. In this case, the role is entrusted to Benjamin Voisin, one of the most talented young French actors. Unlike Visconti's film, this film is in black and white, but I leave it to you to discover other differences. Park Chan-wook, another movie that was given for granted in the Italian selection. Park Chan-wook was in Venice 20 years ago with this film that concluded his trilogy on revenge, Lady Vendetta. This movie is taken from a novel by Donald Westlake, The Axe. Costa Gavras had based his 2005 movie, Headhunters, The Axe in English. In short, it is a story of a manager who lost his job, and 2 years later, he decides to eliminate all competitors for the new positions he aspires to. Fifth and last Italian movie in competition, Sotto le nuvole, Gianfranco Rosi. There is certainly no shortage of documentaries on Naples, but just a few escaped the temptation of local color. Rosi's new film is an exception, not only because it is shot in black and white. Rosi spent 3 years in Naples in order to compose an affectionate and philosophical, even ironic mosaic that brings together past and present grave robbers and firefighters, archaeologists and prosecutors in the Republic, the humanity of a street teacher, and the echo of a war in a Syrian ship carrying grain from Ukraine. You will discover the movie yourself. Benny Safdie, one of the two brothers, who is alone in the creation of this movie. Also, his brother is working alone to another movie that will be screened in the autumn, The Smashing Machine. It is the real story, the true story of Mark Kurt, a wrestling champion of the 90s, played by Dwayne Johnson, who is himself a wrestling champion, better known as The Rock before becoming an actor. Next to him, we have Emily Blunt in the part of his wife in a memorable performance. Last movie, and we have come to the end of this long list of titles, is the first film by Shu Qi, one of the greatest actresses in Asian cinema, the muse of Hu Xiaoxian. She interpreted at least 3 of his movies 3 times, The Millennium Mambo and The Assassin. Shu Qi wrote it over a decade and then made it in a relatively short time, immediately after being a juror here in Venice a couple of years ago. It is a film about the condition of women that spans several generations. All the women in the film, mothers, wives, and daughters, resist the different challenges. We have come to an end. Did I me that Jean Jarmusch was in Venice in 2003 with coffee and cigarettes out of competition. Many years ago, I must say, my memory is not so strong. A couple of things. First of all, my thanks. President Buttafuoco started by thanking everybody at the beginning of this press conference. My gratitude goes to President Buttafuoco, who has supported me in these 2 years of activity, granting me full freedom of movement and selection. I want to thank Andrea Del Mercato, the best general manager of La Biennale, although he's very shy, Deborah Rossi, who also directs the Historic Archive for Contemporary Arts, my assistant, Angela Savoldi. You know her better than me because she's sending letters and messages. So when they get the invitation, she's thanked by everybody. The group of people who supported me in the research and selection of the films, we started at the beginning of January. I cannot mention them all, as I cannot mention all those who work in the cinema office. All the girls, they are almost all girls in the cinema office. They are fantastic. Without them, there would be no festival. So my gratitude goes to them. I want to thank Pascal Dio, head of the Venice Production Bridge. I want to thank Savina Neirotti, who manages the Biennale College Cinema. I want to thank Michelle Reillac and Liz Rosenthal, without whom there would be no Venice Immersive Competition. Alessandra Speciale, who holds the strings of Final Cut in Venice. And finally, special thanks to Paolo Lughi, our precious head of the press office. Before closing, we will show you another clip, 6-7 minutes from this Franco Maresco's unfinished film about Goffredo Fofi. 5 minutes that evoke the formative experience that Fofi had with when he moved to Palermo. He joined the group of Danilo Dolci, a writer, a poet, committed to support the poor, the humble, the forgotten. He made a number of food. He fasted for many days. And Goffredo Fofi, he was 18-year-old. He made these activities with Danilo Dolci in what used to be Cortile Cascina in the 1950s. Well, Goffredo talks about that experience, the fundamental experience in his life, he says. Not only did he understand the need to be active during your life and not just rejoice your artistic or critical activity. Goffredo became famous for his activities in this sector. He was an extraordinary cinema and literature critic. He started a number of initiatives who are still a reference for our literary culture. But Goffredo Fofi started there. And as you will see in this clip, he would have always liked to go back there because rather than vanity as an intellectual, what was really important for him was his being a person, an active person, fighting against everything and everybody to give a meaning not only to his life, but to his human dimension, who is part of the society where many people live in total neglection. I invite you to the pre-inauguration of the film festival with the two films I already mentioned, the Bertrand's documentary on the Venice Lagoon and the reconstruction of the latest movie by Erich von Stroheim, Queen Kelly, accompanied by an ensemble of 8 musicians playing a score composed for that occasion. Thank you all for the attention and see you soon, I hope.
Goffredone.
Ciao.
Ciao. Come va? Grazie per essere venuto.
Non dire scemenze. Mannaggia. È brutto essere vecchi. Sì.
Come è brutto essere vecchi?
È brutto.
Mi vedi? È brutto essere vecchi.
È brutto, siamo brutti.
Siamo brutti.
La contraddizione è nel fatto che io godevo a occuparmi dei bambini e dei morti di fame. Ecco, era il mio mondo. Sono entrato lì a 18 anni e mi ci sono trovato coinvolto in un modo assoluto, perché Cortile Cascino era questo, i poveri, reietti, marginati e i bambini, insomma. Lì mi sono costruito le mie idee, anche sulla letteratura, anche sul cinema, anche su tutto il resto. Il resto è venuto veramente molto dopo. E questo è quello che mi manca di più oggi. Se fossi giovane ripartirei da lì, non certo dallo scrivere libri o fare il critico.
Noi abbiamo recuperato delle foto e qui ce n'è una tua, tu qui sei proprio nel periodo di cui stai parlando.
Qui
no?
è il digiuno, il primo digiuno mi pare fine 56 e nella baracca di Cortile Cascino in cui io abitavo.
Che era tutta tua, diciamo.
Sì. Quando ci fu il digiuno, Danilo arrivò e ovviamente cambiò anche un po' la scenografia perché voleva, come dire, lui in qualche modo, come dire, gli serviva venire a fare il digiuno a Cortile Cascino perché era il punto più infame di Palermo secondo tutti e poi perché c'ero io che gli assicuravo una audience, no? Un'attenzione da parte, insomma ero il garante del fatto che, capito? E quindi io una brandina, lui sul tavolo e digiuniamo appunto quei 7 giorni. I primi giorni tu soffri la fame, poi entri in un altro stato in cui non te ne frega più niente di mangiare. Mi sembrava di essere il principe Andrei in Guerra e Pace quando muore, cioè guardi il mondo come da un altro pianeta. Il digiuno ti dà una libertà, la testa va per conto suo, il corpo non conta più un cavolo, insomma, e non senti più la fame. Al 4º giorno io proprio finiva la fame e ero una specie di beatitudine, gli ultimi 2 o 3 giorni erano proprio...
Così devono essere esperienze mistiche.
Sì, un'esperienza mistica. Chiave della mia esperienza a Cortile Cascino è stato in una baracca a 2 passi dalla mia, più grande perché era una famiglia numerosa eccetera. Muore una bambina, facciamo una specie di veglia. Nel corso della notte, mentre stiamo vegliando, la bambina è sul letto con un lenzuolo sopra, si sente un crack e gli si spacca la pancia alla bambina e il lenzuolo si copre, insomma ovviamente fuoriescono le viscere, quindi ecco, ovviamente un'impressione enorme. Quando io sono tornato, finita la veglia, diciamo, a un certo punto sono tornato nella mia baracca, io avevo un quaderno, quelli neri che c'erano una volta, insomma, su cui pigliavo degli appunti, delle cose che dovevo fare e ci ho scritto sopra, l'ho ritrovato anni dopo, insomma, ci ho scritto sopra per traverso grosso, proprio chiaramente con rabbia, con una matita con cui proprio da strappare il foglio, ci ho scritto sopra: odio i ricchi. Che mi fa impressione ripensarci, però ti ripeto, per me di tutto quell'anno lì, quello è stato il momento chiave, proprio perché lì ho detto qui no, i bambini devono morire, che cazzo, no?
Tante che una nega l'altra. Come si chiama? A Spadaro, il papà di...
Senti, ma quanto tempo mi torturerai?
No, non ti preoccupare, adesso ci riposiamo. Abbiamo finito, non ti confondere per l'ultima. Io
lo so che è l'ultima, però se appena le 9:30, tirare avanti così fino a mezzogiorno, io crollo.
Ma tu devi crollare, perché io poi devi, nel senso che così devi...